Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our first 2019 workshop for our residents. I'm very, very pleased to see that you came out here on this gloomy night. I was thinking in the midst of the rain the other day that nobody's going to come. We do have a couple things that are a little bit different here. We are live streaming right now. And so those people who are joining us through the air, I guess, welcome to you too. Because of that, then I have to move right along. If you've ever heard me talk before, I tend to ramble and get off on tangents. And sometimes I get so far, I can't remember what, and I'll look at you puzzled and say, why am I telling you this? And then I depend on you to say, well, you were talking about such and such. But bottom line here is, I don't want to take questions now. I'll take questions at the end when I'm sure that we've completed this by 7 o'clock. Normally, as staff here can tell you, I tend to go towards like 7:20 or something along that line and make them stay an extra half hour. So I'm not too popular about doing that. So try to hold your questions. You have a handout, which I don't, but in there, oh, well, thank you very much. In there, oh, it's not there. Okay, I thought in there was my email address and my work phone number, but it's not. But this still can be really easy for you because of the 500 employees that we have here at Coachella Valley Water District. I am the only Don. So you can call the Water District and just ask for Don. And they will patch you into me. And I think we do have a slide that's going to show you my email address and my phone number, so you can be ready to jot that down towards the end of things. So our topic today is citrus care in the low desert for the residential landscape or for home people. And I want to congratulate you now again on being here, because you are contemplating, if not actively growing already, the most compatible fruit tree for the desert. I'll talk more about that later, but citrus trees they're kind of a subtropical, but almost all of them can grow here. And you're going to see not too many other fruit trees can grow here. The other thing is that really there's not an awful lot to do with your citrus tree except step back and get out of the way. All right? You don't have to be like dates, climb up and down the tree half a dozen times. You're not like table grapes, our other big crop here, where you're pruning and thinning and all that stuff. Everything's good, and here comes my boss.
Yep. Sorry, we need you to talk into both mics, so we have to have this one too.
I can't wander around?
Nope, we need you to, yeah, we need that one for the room.
Did you hear what I said all prior to this? Okay, oh, she's good that way. Okay, I'll try to stay close to this, although it's not my habit. So welcome. My personal feeling is everybody should have a fruit tree or so in their yard. Right? Because it's just so easy to grow and it produces such nice stuff. And if you're anti-pesticide and chemicals and so on, you have full control of that. Right? Why uh-oh?
Stand by, everybody. Sorry. Oh. Try again.
Testing 1, 2.
Better? And Jesse, can we turn it up? Everybody good? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get started on this, and I promise I will stop and entertain questions, and you'll have my address and phone number and email, address being here, and you'll be able to get in touch with me if we're not able to get your question answered. So, I took citrus quite some time ago, a number of citrus classes at Cal Poly Pomona. And it required an entire year of study, 3 quarters, 30 hours per quarter, so 90 hours of citrus instruction. So we only have an hour and a half. So what I'm going through are the things that I think are the most important. And so, in order, first choosing and picking out the right tree. Citrus trees go very well in the desert, but some do better than others. Right? And then, very important, you need to plant it in the right place. You need to think about where you're going to put this tree, and think about it may be little like this now, but it's going to get real big later on. So you need to keep that in mind. And then to get the plant off to a good start, you need to plant it correctly. And I'll give you tips on that. And then, happy news, minimize pruning. You don't have a lot of pruning to do with citrus trees. For reasons called apical dominance, you can't train citrus trees like you can peaches and so on. I'll talk about that. It's kind of a tree bush, and that's okay. Don't spend a lot of time trying to prune it because it's not going to follow your directions. Then, especially out here in the desert, we need to protect the trunk from sunburn. There's a tendency, you'll see a slide on it in a few minutes, on growing a citrus tree as what we call a lollipop. So a big trunk comes up, and then you have a tree. It looks like a lollipop. That exposes the trunk to sun. And as far as we can tell, citrus is a subtropical under jungle canopy tree. And therefore its bark does not hold up against sunlight very well. And therefore when it grows, it doesn't grow like a lollipop naturally. It has a full skirt, as you'll see. It goes all the way down to the ground. And that's how it's supposed to grow, not prune it so it's like a lollipop. But there are lollipops out there, a lot of lollipops, and so we need to protect it, and we usually do that by whitewashing the trunk. So we'll talk about that. And then fertilization and irrigation, and then finally protecting from pests and frost. So that's what we're going to cover in the next hour and 15 minutes. So, first tip for you. When you come to a new place, or you're new to horticulture or agriculture, then the first thing I recommend you do is go online or down to the Ag Commissioner's office and get the county crop report. Right? What do the farmers grow in the area that you live that you intend on planting your tree? Right? Because farmers generally grow crops to pay the mortgage, send their kids to school, shop for the groceries. So it's a money enterprise for them, not a hobby. And so if they plant the right plant in the right climate, then they have minimal inputs to take away from their profits. So they pick crops adapted to their area to minimize the cost of production and maximize profits. So you can't go wrong by picking out trees that the farmer's trees grow and crops that the farmer grows. All right? So grow them for best results. So let's look at our crop report for the Coachella Valley. This is a little old, but this is 2015. But if you take a look at that on the front, do you see any apples? Do you see any pears? Do you see any nectarines, peaches, cherries, stone fruits, palm fruits? You don't see any of those up there.
Any avocados?
Well, avocado will be a subtropical, all right? We got two problems here. One, it doesn't get cold enough. So all these trees have a chilling hour requirement. And so they were very happy with how cold it got the past couple of weeks, because the plants, in order to fruit and have a good crop, need to experience a certain number of chilling hours. We don't have near the chilling hours we need to commercially grow apples. I'm not saying that you couldn't grow the plant, but you're not going to get a crop that you're going to make a living out of things. On the other hand, we have the subtropicals, the avocados and the mangoes and the papayas and those kinds of things. And have the other problem is that they freeze. They freeze very easily. And so they just can't make it here either. Again, you can grow it and everything will be fine, and we'll skip frost like until this past couple of weeks. We skipped frost for a couple of years. But then Mother Nature just came right back with a vengeance, and we have a freeze, and subtropicals just get hammered. Right? So, what does that leave? Lemons and limes, oranges and tangerines, grapefruit. So those are the crops that we can grow here, that farmers grow here. Okay? So, not all citrus, though, thrive in the desert. There's many varieties of citrus trees available, but not all of them are the ones you want. Furthermore, some of the mandarins and the tangelos need a different citrus pollinator tree nearby. So if you are planting a tangelo or mandarin and want to get a good crop, you need a cross-pollinator plant nearby. So you have to buy 2 trees instead of 1. Right? So I'm going to go through not the entire spectrum of how many citrus trees are out there in the world, but I'm going to go through the old reliables here. They've been commercial and a lot. And then you can go online and you can find different varieties of almost everything I'm going to get. But the ones I'm going to show you are pretty reliable here. So we've got grapefruits, oranges, mandarins, which are also tangerines, tangelos, lemons, limes, and kumquats. So, grapefruit, ruby red, old reliable, gets a little reddish tinge on it. And marsh grapefruit, another old reliable, that's a white grapefruit, and the ruby red has got red flesh. And then somewhat of a newcomer is Oro Blanco, which is a little more mild. It's a white grapefruit. It's a little more mild. And it also grows here too. Moving on, the oranges. The navel oranges in the navel orange family, of which the Hamlin orange is one, don't have high quality here in the desert. Hamlin is the one that's generally regarded as the best, but I don't know of any commercial navel oranges that are growing down here. If you are and you want one, that would be an orange that you would pick and peel and get the little segments and eat them. Right? Hamlin would be your best choice, but navels, I'm not quite sure why, but they tend to be of low quality in the desert. Everywhere else, just everybody's favorite fruit. But the Valencia orange, that's the juice orange, does very well here. And you can grow that one. That's the one you get up in the morning and go out and pick 2 or 3 of them and juice them and have a good start to your breakfast. The Valencia orange is a really good orange to pick. So you have the Orlando and the Campbell juice oranges that you can pick from. And then a favorite of mine, it's not really commercial, but I just like its aesthetics. And in fact, that does taste good, and that's the blood orange. And the blood orange has that reddish pigment that you're seeing in there. And it grows here. There's one called Taracle and another one called Morel. And that's kind of a novelty fruit. You can, if you'd like, make a salad or something along that line, and you got slices of grapefruit in the salad, well, throwing a little blood orange in there will get everybody's attention real quick. The mandarins, also known as tangerines. We have the clementine. You probably know, been to the supermarket, you see these little cuties and halos in little bags. All right, they're clementines. All right, then you got the Dancy. You notice the rind is kind of rough, etc. You got the Fairchild and the Kennel. The pollinator that it likes is a tangelo of some kind. And then we need to talk about alternate bearing. So I'm really uncomfortable sitting in front of this thing. What happens if I move away? Does it all fall apart? Can't hear me. All right, I'm stuck. I'm stuck. Alternate bearing. Alternate bearing is 1 year you will have so many fruit on that tree that you will hardly be able to see the leaves. And buckets and buckets full of fruit. And you're just in awe of this great tree that you have. Until the next year, when it gives you about maybe 1/5 of what you got the year before. Hardly anything at all. And if you're not aware of the tendency for this tree to do it, you think you did something wrong. I overwatered, I underwatered, I didn't fertilize enough, there's some bug or some disease or something. It's just the way the plant is, kind of thing. And so the year that you get the super harvest, kind of expect. Now, you can try to fiddle around with that, like the year you get the super harvest, that you can prune a bunch of fruit off it. And the idea behind this is that the tree exhausts itself with that super yield, and it just hasn't recovered the next year. So, at any rate, just beware. That's what alternate bearing is, and with these plants, you have it. The tangelos. Oh, he's going to double mark. All right, on the other side. Oh, thank you, Jesse. This is, I got two-gun, except I can't get this on my belt. So one of them went on easy. All right. Does it work? Yes. It works. Great, I'm much more comfortable. Right, so the tangelos. So again, pollinator type tree. So we got the Orlando and Mignone tangelo. And you notice the little kind of nipple thing on the end of the Mignola. That's how you can recognize it right away. All right, and then the lemons. Lemons grow really good out here. So you have the Meyer lemon. You see the fruit, they can get really big. I have one in my backyard. And the Eureka lemon and the Lisbon lemon. So lemons are good citrus trees to have here. Grow really, really well. And then the limes. Limes also grow really, really well. So we have the key lime and the Persian lime, and they grow really, really good. So half keeping an eye on that. I can tell a couple stories. So in my front yard, doing something I'm going to tell you not to do. I had 9 citrus trees, full-size citrus trees in my yard. And I got a couple free limes, And I really had no place to put them but out in the front yard. So between my hedge and the curb, about 9 feet in, I planted these 2 little lime trees. Now I live on a street that has an elementary school. So you go to these trees, they're probably 10, 12 years old now. They're very, very big trees, and they prolifically produce fruit. And that fruit falls on the road. And the little kiddies going back and forth to school, it's an elementary school, love to stomp on the limes. You can always recognize by how, I won't tell you what street it is, but you'll drive down it and you'll see what looked like somebody cracked eggs. All right. So then, you know who's here? My boss. So I'm confessing this because I haven't done it lately. But that's really unsightly. And so I have to wash it off. And you're not supposed to wash off hardscape. And my neighbor comes right out and gives me a hard time about that. So at any rate, as a result, it's not the tree's fault. I shouldn't have planted it there. I don't fertilize it. I water it, but I don't fertilize it. I don't do anything to this tree, and it produces more and more fruit. Every year. It makes me rethink. When we get to fertilization, it makes me really rethink about supplemental fertilizer when the tree seems to be doing very, very well. Those trees have not seen a grain of fertilizer, a pellet of fertilizer in 10 years. The other drawback to that is, and I've given up on this, all the neighbors and nearby love to help themselves to my limes. So I don't mind that because there's no way to police it. Plus I got another lime that they don't know about. It's in the backyard. That's my lime. So at any rate, limes do really, really well here. Just another little tip. Limes, when they're ripe, are like yellow. Right? Really ripe. Everybody thinks they should be like this, where they're bitter and sharp and on your margarita and this kind of thing. And that's okay. But if you leave them on the tree, you'll know they slowly turn yellow. And they'll be juicier and not nearly as tart as they are if we opened up one of those and chewed on the pulp. Okay, now the kumquats. Kumquat is a little tiny fruit, about roughly the size of my thumb here. And it grows on there. And occasionally you see them in the store, but what you do is you just grab it off the tree and just pop it in your mouth. And chew down on it, and it's tasty. It's kind of a mouth freshenizer, and it's just a nice little tree to have on there, almost a conversation piece thing. So that's your choice, all right? Or choice is, and there's others. I didn't by any means cover them all, but these are the old reliables. So if you plant these, you got a really good chance of success. And don't forget there are dwarfs. So those of you who are apartment dwellers, that doesn't mean that you can't have citrus trees. Right? It takes a little bit of art to grow a tree and get, in fact, I don't know where these pictures came from, but that's pretty good yield for coming out of a pot. But many dwarfs are out there, and if you're an apartment dweller, that doesn't mean that you are cut off from growing your own citrus trees. So now you've decided that you're going to plant such and such a type of citrus. And you go down to the nursery or to Home Depot or Muller's or any one of the nurseries, and you want to buy a citrus tree, and they point you towards this. Okay? So you're sitting there, and which one? Which one's the best? Kind of thing. So I'm going to give you a few tips on that. This one's the best. But I'll tell you why. Okay, so which one should I choose? Okay. Online is because it's got so many pages. It's not economical for us. If we printed them all out and gave you your own copy, we'd have to raise your water rates. So you can go online and get this. Citrus fruit for home planting. And this covers virtually everything, but I make it more personable thing. So on page 6 and 7, on this magazine that you're going to get online, will tell you what the tree look like. Young trees are best, but the worst thing you can do, I mean, it's not horrible, but people like to buy citrus trees in maybe 20, 30-gallon pots that already have fruit on them. That's not a good thing to do. Younger trees take to their new home and grow better than old trees that are set in their ways and probably root bound, as I'm going to show you a picture in a couple minutes. So young trees are best. And a diameter of 1/2 a one-year tree to 3/4 of an inch above the bud union. So the next thing is, what is the bud union? Okay? So here's the bud union. It's right there. So virtually all citrus trees that you buy are 2 trees. The bottom is a rootstock. It's a wild citrus. There are a number of wild citrus trees. They're very tough. They have disease resistance, they have frost resistance, they have salinity resistance, they have a lot of stamina. So they grow in the ground really, really good, but they produce terrible fruit. Now, all of you have seen Annenberg's place with all the trees and stuff around it. Well, I'm Little Annenberg. I have a citrus rootstock called sour orange that rings the perimeter of my front yard. Sour orange is just what you think. It's a beautiful fruit, right? Except you open it, it's got 1 million seeds, and should you taste it, your face is going to scrunch up. It is very, very sour. But it's tough, and its thorns are like this. And so when I first got married and started having kids, I wanted kind of a security fence around. So I went down to one of the nurseries and I bought a bunch of rootstocks and planted them at 1 foot interval. Extremely thorny. Well, now, some of them are that tall. So, again, you'll find out where I live by what? The squashed fruit on the road and then this big hedge, big tree hedge kind of thing. So, those are rootstocks. Very thorny. I don't know how many balls have been punctured, and nobody but nobody goes through my hedge. It is a virtual pincushion. Right now, the scion is the top part of the tree, and it's the fruit bearing. So the fruit bearing part of the tree. So I'm going to show you how a citrus tree is made. So the rootstock, they grow the rootstock from seed. We don't grow citrus trees from seed because they don't reproduce true. All right, so they do what we call asexual production. Sexual production is, you know, one tree pollinates another tree, and it's a hybrid of some kind. All right, but citrus trees don't reproduce true. So we find a citrus tree, like say a navel orange. Somewhere as a mutation long, long ago, somebody discovered that navel orange and said, wow, this one's different and it really tastes good. And so they took cuttings and they took buds and they propagated it. Probably somewhere back in history, somewhere is the mother navel plant tree. Same thing with dates. somewhere is the mother Deglet date that produced all the other dates. So what we do is they plant the seed, they grow the rootstock. It gets, maybe this size. In the spring, when the leaves are going and the sap is moving up from the tree because it's springtime and we're blooming out, then they cut a T right here and then down, and they peel the edges back. And in the scion being, let's say it's a navel orange, they get a green branch from a navel orange, and they cut that little bud out right by the leaf, and they slip it in there, right? Looks like that. And then they put wax around it. And so what you have is the rootstock. Oops, I'm sorry. The rootstock is here, and there's the scion. And you notice they cut the rootstock and broke it. And so now that branch, which is still alive, is a nurse branch. It's a nurse branch that helps nourish and give that little guy up to a start. And so after the little guy gets a little bit bigger and so on, they cut the top part completely off. And what you have is right here. How well you can see that. But this is the rootstock, and you can see it's just like a branch coming out of the side, and this is where the old rootstock was. And here's the fruit-bearing part of the tree. So this is the scion, this is the rootstock, right? And this is the bud union where they took place. Kind of like what do you call it, heart transplant? This is a tree branch transplant, right? So right there is the bud union. So repeating myself, now you know where the bud union is, that you go up and you check the diameter. And basically 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. This guy's just a little bit over a 1/2 inch above, right? And then if it was 2 years, which is the maximum I recommend tree that you get, then it'll be a little bit bigger. Thanks. What you don't want is a great big, thick trunk with a big thing and fruit growing out of it. The other thing is no fruit. And when you do get fruit, if you get a little fruit first year or two, it'd really be best for you, when you see it, to clip it off. And let all the leaf production go into developing a good root system and a good tree. It's probably the 3rd or 4th year before you really start getting a significant yield from these trees. So I know you're all human beings, and human beings is a thing in a hurry. But if you can restrain yourself, your tree will really appreciate it, because those leaves are always there, and they're producing sugar, and if there's no fruit for the sugar to go to, tree goes faster, bigger, roots go bigger. Remember, this tree is going to produce fruit for you for 20, 30 years. So we want to give it a really, really, really good start. So as it's growing and it's little, get your fruit from the store. Also, check the drainage holes. So the little drainage holes at the bottom of your pot, if you got roots coming out, or you can see a root was coming out and they pruned it, so you see kind of a pencil-like thing here snapped off, that means this plant has been in this pot a long, long time, right? That's not the tree that you want, right? So those are things that you look on, because this is what happens. If you look at the tree on your left, that's what root bound is. The tree has been in the pot too long, and it's going round and round and round and round, and if you plant it like that, those roots will continue to go round and round, get bigger and bigger, and they cut each other off. Sometimes when you see a tree blown off by the wind, just any tree, and you go look at the roots, you can see where they've gone round and round, gotten bigger, choked each other off. And that's the end of that tree. So we don't want that. So what we'll do, if you take your tree out to plant it, and you see that, then what you do is you take a knife, go in about an inch at the 4 points of the compass, and cut those roots so that now instead of going round and round and round, they're going to branch out. All right? Same thing on the very bottom, just make an X. Right? I know it's hard for you to hurt your new baby tree, but under these circumstances, it's one of those things. All right, so now you got a tree, nice small young tree, about the right size, not too old, not any fruit on it, no roots coming out of the drain holes. Then we got to plant it. So first of all, unless you're dealing with a dwarf or semi-dwarf, this tree is going to get big. So be careful where you plant it. Like me planting 9 feet from the curb. When I planted that little tree, that seemed like a lot of distance. But 3 times I have had to prune that thing back because the guy who street sweeps me, when the fruit's going over past the curb, he just goes all around. And so the third way you can distinguish my house from anybody else's is that the curb is always dirty and has leaves on it, kind of thing. So I've had to go in there and prune it back. So give it some space. Visualize in your head that this is going to be a big tree. All right? Full sun, really important. Minimum 8 hours, full sun a day, right? So that's what it needs to grow good. Not like if it's 7 hours, it's going to die or anything, kind of thing. But again, if you want good fruit, good healthy tree, etc., one of my little mantras is a plant is first and foremost, always and forever, a light-eating machine. All the fertilizer in the world, all the water in the world is not going to make up for a lack of sunlight. So 8 hours full sun minimum. Drainage, okay. Tip for you. In this pot from the nursery is a potting soil. Now the nurseryman is in the business not of growing citrus trees for fruit, grow little citrus trees to sell. So they want a light, fluffy soil because this has got to be transported. People have to pick it up, put it in the truck, and they have to drive it to like the retail nursery, etc. So there's a lot of organic matter in it. It's nice, fluffy, light soil, and it's not like your soil at all, right? This is like the perfect soil, okay? So now what you're going to do is you're going to take it out of its pot and put it in your, relatively speaking, your lousy soil and expect it to grow and be happy. What is the incentive for those roots to leave their nice, warm, cozy home and move into your stony, clayey type compacted soil? Right? Not an awful lot of incentive there, but you can overcome that by doing a couple things. First thing is you dig your hole. So you're going to plant, and I'm going to show you an illustration of that probably the next slide. But you dig your hole. I suggest you do that around 4 in the evening, or be finished around 4 in the evening, and then take some water and a transplant fertilizer, like Upstart, right? And whatever the directions say, you fill the hole full of water. Actually, I'd fill it halfway full of water. I put a cup of Upstart in it and fill it the rest of the way. right up to the top. Go in, have your evening cocktail and a good meal, and go to bed. And come back out the next morning. Right? The water should be gone. If the water is gone, then you've got good drainage. If the water's not gone, if it's still standing there, if the hole's half full, you've got a drainage problem. And eventually your tree is going to rot and die. Right? Because the water's got to drain. Roots need water, but they need oxygen too. Usually what you do in that case, and our soils are pretty good here, but you take like a post hole digger or something and dig down through what is probably some kind of a restricted layer. So maybe there's some clay or something that you hit. And then you punch through that kind of and maybe a couple of inches thick, and then you're back into sand again. And it's that restricted layer that's impeding your drainage. You gotta break through that kind of thing. Up in Yucca Valley, places like that, they have caliche, which is also underground, but it's like rock solid. You have to really take a crowbar or something and break through it. But you gotta have that water draining. The other advantage is, what if I took the upstart and put it in here? Okay? What would be the incentive for these roots to leave? I'm staying in here, right? Because the food's here, the root stimulant's here. There's no reason for me to go out there in the cold, cruel world. Things. So by taking it and putting the upstart in the hole with the water, and the water drains, and the upstart is now in the surrounding soil. So now your roots have a little bit of incentive to leave the cozy comfort of home and move out into the soil a little bit, right? Generally, and it's hard now, usually early spring after danger of last frost. But when is last frost? It's harder and harder. It's not so predictable anymore. For a couple of years, we didn't have any frost. And then a couple of weeks ago, we had a pretty good frost. And so, are we going to get another one? You know, with this global warming, the melting of the ice caps, jet streams moving around here and there, polar vortexes. We can't rely on weather as much as we did anymore. But generally, after March, even in the February, extremely rare. I've been here since the mid-70s. Has there been a frost? Yeah. Usually, traditionally, the frost would be Thanksgiving weekend, first frost. Now, didn't get it till January. Thanks. So that's probably the best time to plant if you want to play it safe. Second thing, well, there's your quick start. There's a couple others, brand names like this one too. It's for transplants. Okay, I'm going to show you the illustration in a minute. Well, let's go through the text first. So, okay, there's the illustration. Now, you used to buy citrus trees in burlap. There's burlap wrapped around the root ball kind of thing. If you go to a nursery, a commercial nursery, not a retail nursery like we have here, if you go to a commercial, and we used to have a couple way down in Oasis near Valerie Jean's. I'm not sure they sell retail anymore, but that's a citrus production area. And their trees would be burlapped. All right. Ours, generally, when you buy them, they're in the plastic. So you need to carefully remove the tree from this. And what you can do by putting your hand here is as wide as you can, is turn it upside down and tap it against the edge of the table. I'm not going to demonstrate here in the boardroom that procedure, but the ball will pretty much stay together, and you very carefully take it and put it in the hole, right? So, and make a little basin, and then tamp the soil down to backfill. And on the backfill, use the backfill, not some artificial garden soil thing, compost, whatever. Use native soil as your backfill, right? So the stuff that you dug out of the hole that's in the pile right next to the tree, it might take, if there's stones or stuff in it, remove the stones, but backfill with that, right? So the plant's not being fooled by, I'm leaving this home, which is really a nice home, to the next one with a bunch of soil amendment on it, and that's a pretty good home. And then there's your home, your soil. And by introducing it to your soil in the backfill, then it's a better transition for the plant. But one of the most important things to do, and now I'm going to back up, and don't add fertilizer. This is your fertilizer right here, this upstart that you put in there. It's a very weak fertilizer. You don't need to add any more fertilizer. So you got the tree in the ground, made your little basin and so on, and then you're standing on the soil next to the tree, undisturbed soil. All right? So this is not a pitchfork, but a spading fork. You notice that the tines are not thin like you would if you were tossing hay. Right? This is to mix soil, but I don't want you to mix the soil. What I want you to do is to stick it in the ground around your tree, around your planting hole. Just stick it in all the way down to the bottom and just shake it. Don't pick it up and turn it over like you would if you were making a vegetable garden. Just loosen the soil a little bit and go around the tree about a foot all the way around it and loosen it, because in many cases your soil, your native soil, is very compact. It's just hard for roots to penetrate. And if you just loosen things up a little bit, it'll be better for your tree. You want your tree to get a really good start. Spading fork.
How often do you fertilize a standing tree?
We'll get to that. Right. So the Moto paint, you probably don't have to worry about that. We're going to talk about paint in a couple of minutes. But when you do stick it in the ground in the planting hole, the root ball should be maybe a ½ inch higher than the grade of your soil. Just a little bit up there, not way down, because if you push it way down deep in the hole, then this bud union's going to have soil come up close to it. And then it will grow a rootstock instead of your fruiting tree. So it needs to be up just a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfectly level. Certainly we don't want it to be lower than the grade, but just about ½ inch above, all right? And you think it's going to dry out and all this stuff. No, it won't. So, all right, and then mulch. Mulching is using some kind of cover. I prefer organic. I prefer wood chips. And put it around the tree, under the canopy. So here is a perfect example of trees that are mulched right out to the canopy. The canopy is if like the tree was an umbrella. So there would be the drip line if it was an umbrella, and that would be the drip line. And you notice that the wood chips or whatever they're using there, I think it's wood chips, go right out to there, right? The other thing that I suggest you do is put a little trunk protector on the tree, right? So You put this, I would remove that stake, but we're just doing things for demonstration here. So we put this around here, and it does two things. One thing is, remember this is not a lollipop yet, so sunburn could happen right here. But the other thing is weed eaters. Weed eaters are the big killer of small trees. You want everything nice and neat, especially if you don't mulch. So you're going up there with your weed eater and you whack the tree. The conducting tissues of the tree is called the cambium layer. It's just inside the bark. Which is worse, pounding a nail into a tree or carving your initials in the tree? The initials, much worse, because the nail will go in there and it will pierce the cambium layer and go into like what we call the heartwood of the tree. But it's just a little disturbance. But if you carve a heart, and like for me, I'd carve DA plus CA, my wife, and carve that in there good, boy, you're just disrupting the flow. And it's going to slow things down until it calluses over, etc. You got a
Quick question. Would it be okay to use the actual leaves from the citrus when it gets bigger?
going to get to that.
Okay. And the second question is, shade cloth for wrapping it, is that okay?
Yeah, or you could just get cardboard. We discovered Amazon, or my wife did. So all our Christmas shopping was Amazon. I can't believe how much cardboard. And that was just our house kind of thing. So you just cut a piece of cardboard. It's just aesthetics. Right? And you know, soften up a little bit, wrap it on. Just keep the sun out of it. And if the weed eater comes and whacks it, I'm entertaining questions a little bit because I'm on time for a change. Okay. The one. Oh. All right. So that's probably a good idea. So hold your questions till the end. All right. Because I'll get off on some tangent. 20 minutes will go by. All right. So mulching the tree is a good thing. Now, just a couple other little things. In the winter, when there's danger of frost, it's enhanced, frost is enhanced by an organic mulch. It's like a blanket. So one of the tricks is to go in there with like those big stones you do in landscaping. And you put those where the mulch is. And they gather heat during the day and be radiated at night and have a frost. But then you got to move them all when it starts to get really hot. So I'm not sure that's worth the time. But if you're really into this, you can do it. All right, pruning. Don't try to prune a citrus tree like you would an apple or a peach or something. You know, you see the vase shape going out there, nice. You can prune a tree like that, and at the end of the day it'll look like that, but in 2 or 3 weeks it won't look like that. It'll look like a big bush again, kind of thing. Citrus trees have a thing called apical dominance. And what that means is the top bud rules. So, apical dominance, apis being the top. So here's probably the top bud, or maybe this one, right? So he suppresses or dampens down the growth of all these other guys underneath them. You see this most commonly in lemons. Lemons, a big shoot will go way up, and that's apical dominance in full blast. And all the other branches below are attenuated somewhat. But he gets up to a point, especially with lemons, and he falls over. He begins to bend over. And now this is the top bud. And it starts growing. And then, and so citrus trees, you can't prune them. I've tried, and there's just no sense doing it, because it'll look nice when you're done, but give it a few weeks and it will look like you didn't do anything. All right, so there's this kind of a tree bush thing as opposed to a tree like an oak or an apple or peach or pear. They're trainable. Citrus are wild and unruly. Remove rootstock suckers. So now I'm going to show you a picture one in a minute, but remember the rootstock? And then you got a little rootstock trunk coming up to the bud union. Suckers, little branches will come out below the rootstock. And they'll start growing. They'll start growing really good because they're part of the rootstock. There's no transplant thing here. And they'll take over your tree. I've seen rootstocks come and start growing, and people didn't know what they were and didn't know what to do about it. And they'll go right up through the tree. And then it gets up there and it dominates all the other branches below it. Have you heard of the fruit salad tree? Fruit salad tree is, they get a rootstock, and they get a bud from a grapefruit, a bud from a lemon, a bud from a tangelo, and they bud them. And so one branch is an orange, and one branch is a lemon, and one branch is a grapefruit. Yeah, kind of a neat little thing, right? Except one of those will have a better take, a better graft than the other two. And it will grow faster than the other two. And then when it gets above them, apical dominance comes in, right, and suppresses it. And pretty soon they get weak, and then they die, and you're back to a single tree and a single scion again. So you see that over and over again. What happened to my fruit salad tree? So here's how to fight that, if you want to do that, is when you got your three branches, your orange, your lemon, and your grapefruit, and one of them's clearly doing better than the others, you snap him back so his bud is no higher than the other two. All right? And then the other two have a chance. You got to do that all the time because, don't mess with Mother Nature. Fruit salad trees are not normal. And so the rootstock, who are these guys, grafted onto me? They're parasites as far as the rootstock goes. And so, but you can do that. But you got to be right on it. Because if one branch gets ahead, it's going to dominate, and you'll see it. You got a little orange, a little grapefruit, and that lemon's twice as high. Okay? So, when you see these things below the rootstock, preferably before they even get any wood on them, they're just green tissue, you can just pull them off. No little suckers coming from the rootstock. Now, as your tree gets bigger and bigger, you'll get suckers, water sprouts coming in on the side, and they'll grow too. Why am I blanking on that? Rootstock suckers. Scion suckers, there they are, number 2. They're just involuntary growth that comes out and shoots up for some reason or another. But they can be fruit bearing. So what you do with them, instead of letting them go right up through to the top of your tree, when you see them grow, don't cut them off. Just reach in there and pull them out of the canopy halfway down. And just pull them out, because that's bearing wood. That will produce fruit for you. But below the bud union, you do not want any suckers because that's the rootstock. It's not going to give you any fruit, and it's going to be thorny and nasty, and it'll take over your whole tree.
Does it end up killing it?
Maybe over a long period of time, but I've seen a couple that we went out to, and it was clearly half the tree. Probably in the long run it would, but so now the other thing is don't make lollipops, okay? All right, so there's the suckers. All right, so you don't want those on there because the rootstock's right here. And now look at that and look at the thorns. That's the other clue that you're dealing with a rootstock, because commercial scions don't have big thorns like that. How come? One, the pickers aren't going to appreciate those big thorns. Number two, when the wind blows and the tree sways, then it pierces the fruit and so on. Okay, so big thorns. We're good. Right? All right, here's a lollipop. You see these all over the place. People prune the lower branches, so this tree looks like a Michigan tree or somewhere else tree. And what you're doing there is you're taking away probably almost half of your fruit-bearing area, and you are also opening up that trunk to sunburn. Right? So this is what your tree should look like. You should have a skirt, and the skirt should go all the way down to the ground. All right, that's going to increase your bearing area, and it's also protecting the trunk from sunburn, kind of thing. You prune it.
Go to the orange groves, you don't see any like that.
They should be like that. I spent half my career crawling under them.
I've never seen one like that either, even in Riverside. They always are above the rootstock.
Well, it might be, because right now when we're getting the irrigation, micro sprays are a big deal now, and so you got to crawl under the tree to maintain it, so that they may be lifting up the skirt a little bit. Right? So the lollipops, no lollipops. So if you do have a lollipop, or just something happens, then what you need to do is protect that trunk from sunburn. Right? You can use tree wrap. It's something like this. But what you usually generally do is paint the trunk white, like that. We back up. You gotta pay attention to this. Water-based, latex-based paint, not oil-based. Oil-based will go through the bark, hit that cambium layer, and wipe out your tree. No spray painting. Out with the brush. You're going back and forth. Now, interestingly enough, I usually just go down to Home Depot and say, I want a white paint, latex. And they do it. But I was looking for, and there's a commercial type. It's in a green can. I can't find it anywhere. This is a new one. And this is a paint for sunburn and so on, but it's brown. I've never seen it before, never used it before. It says, why be white? You can have the more natural look. And this protects against sunburn, and it's porous, so the little pores the called stomach can breathe. So, hey, Ray.
Does it matter flat base or semi-gloss?
Is a glossy paint, usually flat. Do that. All right, and there's a handout in there on that. All right, we're back up. Number 5. This is a trick. I don't know anybody else who's done this. When I got my bachelor's degree in psychology and decided I wanted to go back to the land, and then went to school here at CVWD at first, and then ended up at Oregon State studying ag education and agronomy. But I started out as a psychology person, and I was raised in a small town in Michigan, but I was not a farmer kind of thing. We had a little garden, and my mother had it in the backyard, and she would bribe me. She'd grow rhubarb. I love rhubarb pie. So if I weeded the garden, she would give me, the rhubarb pie kind of thing. So point being, it wasn't until I was an adult that I began to study this stuff. That was long ago in a land far away. But one of the things that I did, so I was always afraid that there was something that everybody who grew up on a farm knew, but I didn't grow up on a farm. I did some basic, really important thing. So I was continuously reading and so on, trying to make up for my lack of experience. And so Sunset Magazine, I was here, so Sunset Magazine back then had a calendar, what to do in the desert. I used to read that every month. This is when you prune roses, this is when you fertilize, we do this, that, and the other thing. And they'd have little articles, and they still do. And one of them was bonsai. Bonsai is where you make plants and make them little by selective pruning, very careful. And he hated to cut a little branch because it left that little white thing. It kind of looks, it's just a scar when you do it. And he hated that because it marred his masterpiece. So he hit on the idea of bandaging that pruning wound. They tell you right now, use pruning paint. But think about it. Pruning paint is oil-based. It's like asphalt. It's black. So it's going to absorb heat. So, and he didn't want that on his bonsai either. So he hit on the idea of duct tape. So he would get shiny, although now that's all you could get way back then. But now you can get all kinds of colors of duct tape. So this one's kind of a pale. So the duct tape does a couple things. It's light, so it reflects sunlight, doesn't absorb sunlight, doesn't get real hot. But it's also an adhesive, and it seals things in. And you do this on a branch, you cut it, and then you put a patch over it and then I circle it, kind of thing. And people go by and see me do this and think I'm crazy. But I swear, a year later, you come back and you peel off that duct tape and it will be calloused over. If you don't, you'll have that stump there forever. It will callus all the way over, kind of thing. Now, no farmer with 40 acres of citrus trees would take every pruning cut and do this. But home gardeners, that's the beauty of that. We can do that if we want to. And it heals things up. It's just one more of those things. Which reminds me of something I forgot to tell you about. So, at any rate, silver duct tape is probably the best because it reflects and seals things in real nice. And if you got a good canopy, nobody can see it anyway. Yes?
Would it be smart to paint it in that year and then take it off?
Yeah, I paint it.
I mean, just so it doesn't look like duct tape?
Yeah, painted duct tape. I'll take it off and I'll dab it again. But usually, once you get the canopy covering the tree, you don't have to paint it anymore. A lot of people like the aesthetic. It just kind of looks nice. All right, I'm going to jump back, way back, and give you another trick. Okay. You're going to the nursery and you're going to pick out your tree. And you remembered all this stuff. You're there with your little tape looking for that half inch above the bud union. You're doing all this good stuff. And you get him, but before you get him, you walk around the tree, don't move it, and you see it. All right. Then what you do is you take a knife and you go on the very edge with a compass and just notch north, right? So when you plant this guy, you plant him the way he was in the nursery. Understand that, remember, the tree is following light. So if the tree is light like me, and the sun is going here, and all its leaves are used to the sun flowing, all right? But if you turn me around, now it's just a little hint. The whole idea, none of these things are life and death, but it's attention to detail kind of thing. It only takes you a second to put a little notch, and then you say, okay, guy, you're used to north being there, I'm going to plant you so north is still there. The other little thing, anybody, Thousand Palms, Desert Hot Springs, high wind areas. When you plant your tree in a high wind area, you do two things. One is you push on the windward side. All right. If the wind's coming this way, I would not plant the tree like this because it's putting a lot of strain on the bud union. I would reverse it so the wind's coming on this side of it. And so it's solid, it's pushing against it. And the other thing I would do, I didn't do this, but I would tilt it into the wind slightly. So this would be almost perfect. If I was out in Thousand Palms and you know, I knew the wind was really going to beat up on this tree, I would tilt it into the wind, and the wind will slowly blow it straight after a while. You go out to like Shadow Ridge, golf places like that, way out there, and you can see the trees. They're just bent over to the side. So if you plant them slightly tilted into the wind will blow them upright. Just another little trick. Boy, I'm really doing good. Whoops. Okay, irrigation. This is the hardest thing to do. You need to measure the output of whatever it is you're watering with. So if it's a bubbler or if it's drippers, etc. Take like a Pyrex measuring cup or something if you got drippers. If you've got bubblers, I should have brought one. You can put a fitting on, turn it upside down, and run it for a minute, and see and catch how much water you're getting, and then you can do the math and figure out how many gallons an hour your tree is getting, and then adjust your clock accordingly. All right. The other thing you can do is take advantage of our rebate program and get a self-adjusting clock. That will, and they'll help you program it, and it will just adjust the watering level. Right? So, in your handout there, one of those, towards the very back, is a chart. There's two tables. The bottom one is how many gallons per day the plant needs in the desert. And that would be us. Kind of things. The size of the tree, canopy size, is that what it says? Okay, the canopy is diameter. All right. Or you can take a tape ruler and go out there and radius times 2. Right? And then you can figure out how many gallons per day. Now, another thing that you may or may not notice, this is the new part of my lecture here. All right, so water out to the drip line. Okay. Here's what happens. People buy these trees and they plant them. They stick a bubbler right here. Okay, that's good. But the tree gets big, and the roots go right along with the tree, and they never move the bubbler. It's ridiculous to see a 10, 12-inch tree trunk with a single bubbler a foot away from it. And that's the water. The roots follow the drip line. So, water out. Also, this bit about irrigating every day. The only people that irrigate every day in citrus are farmers with drip irrigation systems. And they generally irrigate every day. But probably a better way is to give it a good drink, like fill the basin, and then wait a few days before you do it again. And give it a good drink, get the water down deep. Usually, well, when should I irrigate? I don't know whether I should irrigate or not. If there's a number of things you can do, there's soil probes, but probably if the soil, the top quarter inch of the soil is like bone dry, then it's water time. Right? Now, something, all right, this is a new phenomenon. This isn't the best picture of it. But you see it, and it's not just citrus. You see it all over the valley past 2 or 3 years. Branches die. So over here, all right, this is reasonably good, but this one right here, it dies. The rest of the tree is doing good, and this branch is just dead, or close to dead. And as I said, it's a phenomenon. And dead of summer. And the thought is this: when we start hitting these, which we have for 2 years in a row now, when the temperature breaks 122, that the tree just cannot keep up. So you got 122 degrees out there, and the atmosphere, dry, hot, is pulling the water through the tree, and the tree can't get up. So the thought is, there's a number of things. The tree can get weakened, diseases can come in, but the general thought on this right now is that the tree pulls a triage. It says, okay, I can't feed everybody, so I'm going to sacrifice a limb. And it does. It just cuts it off, and there's enough water for the rest of the tree. But the one that got cut off, it is triage, it's gone. And you have to cut it off. So there's 2 defenses against this. One is, on most of you have irrigation clocks. If you have one of ours, which you should have, because they're free, and they have little weather stations on them. But either way, they got a percent adjust. And if you're watching the weather and they're up there saying, you know, we got a major heat wave, the temperature's over 120, etc. Did you do a percent adjust on your clock? You don't have to fiddle with everything. Just go in there and say, most of the time you water at 100%, just crank it up to 120%. And the next irrigation will give it 20% more water, right? Which will help. And keep an eye on it, because it just can't keep up. And all indications are is that more of these types of days are going to be in our future, unfortunately.
So with enough water, you don't have any problem?
Well, here's the second thing. That's what I just told you is good, fast, and easy, right? But here's a better solution. Look at the tree right here. Those are drippers, and the middle part is the dripper, and the outside part is the wetting pattern. And you notice it's got the one tree, this tree, has 10 or 11 emitters on it. And the under canopy is completely wet. Completely wet. So you got much more water for the tree to dry on than that one bubbler next to the trunk that maybe just goes out 2 or 3 feet. We don't have, generally, you should be under the canopy, you should be wetting the whole area under the canopy, right? So here, they just took a hose, it's got drippers on it, you can't see them here very well, and it's did a spiral around it. And here they just got more emitters and more emitters. So the problem is that people come and they irrigate properly when it's a baby tree. But the tree keeps growing and they forget to keep adding drippers. And so that's a problem. So not only give it more water when it's going to be really hot, but get maybe some spaghetti tube or something and shoot out some more water. Increase your wetted area.
Off to the drip line. To the drip line.
To a drip line, yeah. I think a lot of these trees, it would be a lot better for them. And then you can use microspray. That's what a microspray is. That shoots out, and then you don't have to put all those emitters. Just hook up the microspray. It's on a stake, stick it in the ground, it throws 6 8 feet. Easy breezy. So that's done. And you can actually use a regular lawn spray head sprinkler, half circle on either side of the trunk, and get a nozzle that throws out to the canopy. That's even easier. All right, we're wrapping things up here. All right, fertilization. I got real mixed feelings on this because what I told you about my citrus trees. I've got 9 citrus trees. They all produce a goodly amount of fruit. I never fertilize them. Never, ever fertilize them. But what I don't do is rake the leaves. Think about a natural tree in the forest. Long before mankind came up with fertilizer bags. How did these big forests grow if somebody wasn't out there laying fertilizer down? Right? So what does a tree do? The roots extend beyond the drip line, the canopy. So what the tree does is its roots go way out there, another 10 feet beyond the canopy, pulls in nutrients, brings them up to the tree through the roots, goes up in the tree, produces leaves, leaves die, they fall right under the tree, and that's a transfer of nutrients. See how that's worked? That's how they work. So it doesn't look nice and neat, right? My neighbors frown, but I got leaves underneath my citrus trees, and they seem to be doing well. Now you get a bag of citrus fertilizer. There's a whole we have a whole class on fertilizer, and put it down using the directions 3 times a year. But I want to point out one other thing here. You guys are homeowners. You don't want maximum yield. You're not making your living doing this. You jam them with fertilizer and stuff and get super yield, well, that's fine, but what are you going to do with the yield? After a while they start shutting the door and pulling the blinds because it's like zucchini. No one's home kind of thing. So, there's a tendency we have we're going to get the most out of this tree, and fertilize this tree, and really get it. And if I'm a farmer and my mortgage depends on it, of course, that is what I would do. But having 9 citrus trees, I'm perfectly happy to have a reduced yield, so I don't have everything that I have to deal with. And all my kids are gone now, so I don't have them to go ahead and do things, clean things up. Like the time I came home from work, and they were home from school, and the swimming pool's full of citrus fruits. And they were so delighted. They said, look, Dad, we made a fruit bowl. Fortunately, it was citrus, and fortunately, the rinds were on them. So it's just a matter of an hour with the net on the pool to get them all out. So anyway, I will not forget that day. Okay, so up to you. But my own experience, especially with those limes in the front, I'm rethinking. I'm a certified crop advisor. I'm a nitrogen advisor. I'm well versed in fertilization, but this has given me pause. And, we just want some fruit. Okay. Pest and pest control. All right, so there's numerous things. It's in that book that you can see online, the pages. Same thing on frost control. You see now, I saw them today shopping around, they have these blanket-like frost blankets that you can drape over your plants. You might have seen some of those. Right. The idea behind that is that holds your seed in. Right. One of the things you can do is you see these landscape fixtures where somebody wants to illuminate their tree, so they have a spike and a light on it, illuminating the tree. But you can put an incandescent bulb in there and put it under the tree, aiming up with the blanket over the top. And I like the outdoor ones because you don't have to worry about electrocuting anybody and everybody. They're outdoor lights. And that's your little source of heat. And that'll usually get you through. Okay, last but not least, harvest. The best place to store your fruit is on the tree. But after a point, this starts to get pretty old, wrinkling a little bit. Quality is not so good. If you leave it on indefinitely, it will interfere with the next bloom cycle. She said, well, why should I put out all these flowers when I've already got fruit on the tree? So in your, I think it's the last handout, is a harvest chart. Right? That's from Phoenix. There's sharp people in the Phoenix area, and they're the same latitude we are. Right? So I steal a lot of their stuff. And that chart's really good for citrus trees. So you know when you're going to be harvesting these different fruit. And you can go ahead and 3 or 4 months before harvest, when it's starting to bloom and blossom and so on, then you can take that fruit and get rid of it. Right? Best thing to do, the cities used to let you take your excess fruit. Now with disease, they don't. All right, so I put them in plastic bags because just leaving the fruit on the ground is an invitation for diseases to take up residence there and insects. So I get rid of it, all of it. Trees start all over again. Ideally, wear gloves when you harvest your citrus because your fingernails can go through the rind, and once the rind is pierced, there's a little skin on it, then microorganisms can get in there and start to grow and wreck your plant. And if you can't get it off, take clippers like pruners and cut the fruit. Don't force the issue and yank it, because you're going to pull part of the rind off and you're going to have a big hole in your citrus. So again, microorganisms, fungus, and so on can get in there and wreck your fruit. Right. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, good work. So will you please repeat all the questions out loud so everyone can hear them?
You bet.
Yellow leaf
Yellow leaves, she wants to know what causes yellow leaves. Lots and lots of things. Most common is the nitrogen deficiency, right? But that's not exclusive. What yellow leaves are is a lack of chlorophyll. So chlorophyll is the little cells that eat sunlight and turn it into sugar. So there's diseases and injuries, overdoing it with salinity. There's a lot of things called yellow leaves. But the first thing that I would do under that circumstances is then I would resort to this. All right. A good general citrus food. I'll get you.
I have a Mexican key lime planted by the pool area, and when we bought the house right beforehand, it got heavily pruned, and it's never produced fruit since. It's been about 3 years.
How's the foliage on the tree?
The foliage is good.
Did the bark get damaged from sunlight? It will look like a bad sunburn, and the bark will kind of peel.
No, I don't believe so. It drops its leaves when it gets chilled. It curls up in the summer.
All right, that could be thrips or something. That's an insect. Its damage is mostly cosmetic. Probably the same answer that she had is assuming that you can't see any damage from the pruning and opening up the canopy to sunlight. Then I would think that maybe we need some extra, something to eat, a boost. So I would come in there with fertilizer. And there's a lot of different fertilizer things. You can save money, but it's just easier to buy citrus fruit. It's not that much more. I just follow the directions. That'll give it the micronutrients and general thing. And then if that doesn't work, come back and see me and we'll do this next year. Or you can get in touch with me.
When you do a pruning cut, do you have to cover when you cut it?
If it's a big cut, then that's when I use the duct tape. Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me again. He wants to know if once you prune, you got the pruning cut, should it be covered? If it's a little thing, 1/4 inch, I don't bother. But 1/2 inch and bigger, most people don't do this, and the tree will heal itself. But it's an extra nice little added touch to just bandage it up. Now, the lady in orange, she said,
All right, I don't know where you live in the Coachella Valley, but when I come to plant something, I'm planting it in pure sand.
okay.
So, I just feel like a tree needs some help besides coming out of that lovely pot with that nice soil, and you stick it in the pure sand, and you're saying use the native soil for your backfill.
Backfill.
I want to put something else in it, because I don't
Okay.
see how that tree is ever going to do well in pure sand.
All right, well, there's a couple ways, there's 2 responses to that. The first one would be not to put fertilizer or a rich soil on the top as your mulch.
I get that.
And
Dig where the roots are.
dig that, then well, that will move down when you water it. That will slowly do it. The other thing to do is a slow release fertilizer. All right, they fertilize very slowly. You've heard of hydroponics where they don't use soil at all?
Yes.
Slow release fertilizer is like an onion. And every time you water a peel of it, I would probably mulch it with something like straw.
Well, what would be wrong with planting it in some kind of soil that's...
If you plant organic matter in deep soil, then it doesn't decompose. And then it can put out gases and stuff. But a shallow application would be okay. But you got to be careful if it's an existing tree. We're talking existing tree?
Planting a new tree, just like that one.
Okay.
And you're just putting it into the ground that is nothing but pure sand.
Under that circumstances, then I would probably spread some kind of compost and stuff on it, and then dig it in with a spading fork.
Is that done before you dig the hole and you get that soil mixed in with some sand and some and then you put the plant into that.
Yes, and give it a little time to break down. The stuff you put in the soil. You don't want to put like raw manure in the soil and then bury
I'm
it.
talking about the same kind of soil that's coming out of that pot. Like, it's good growing.
Yeah,
Buy a bag of it that says.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Manure, right? Manure?
Manure can be okay. It does have salt in it. So I know if manure would be okay.
I have a question, sir. My lemon tree is producing two types of lemons. One is yellow and one looks like an orange. What is that?
Does he have a grapefruit tree?
It looks like a lemon, but it looks like an orange.
But the taste,
Tastes like a lemon, but looks like an orange.
it might be the fact, well, it could be a sport, but more likely it's like last year's lemon.
Really? No, these are new ones coming up.
Brand new one's orange.
Half the tree is yellow.
You need to take a picture of that and send it to me.
Well, it could be a two-way, it could be grafted two different kinds.
It could be, that's kind of unusual. All right, I'm going right down the line here, so
I have a few trees with curly leaves on them. I'm assuming they're like a leaf miner or something. What do I do about it?
probably the thrips. He wants the curled leaves on the citrus. It's usually thrips. They come up out of the ground. You can see their castings sometimes on the ground. And they have raspy mouth parts. And they suck the sap from your leaves, making them curl. There's also a possibility of aphids. So when they're aphids, you'll be able to see them. If it's curled and you open it up, and they're called plant lice, just tiny little aphid things.
And it's sappy, right?
Sometimes, because ants harvest that. So in that case, there's Stouffer's insecticidal soap if you don't want to use chemicals. You spray them on it. Otherwise, also I didn't mention, my general all-around organic type pesticide is neem oil. Kind of thing. It's fungicide, insecticide, and miticide for mites. And you mix this up and spray it, and it's totally harmful, not harmful rather, to anything that eats it. Right, but you got to have the right dose. That's why I just buy Stouffer's insecticidal soap. You can get it from Molars or somewhere, and then you don't have to worry about putting too much soap or not. Or you can go online and find a recipe. All right. All right, lady, second from the back. Yes.
So you recommend mulching mature trees as well?
Say that again.
You recommend mulching mature trees as well?
Any tree appreciates a good mulch. Yes. She wanted to know if mature trees should be mulched. Trees like mulch. That's why I drop all those leaves in front of it. I'll get back there. I'm going across here, so I think you're next.
I don't want to buy a dwarf, but I'm going to buy a regular size tree. But I don't want it to get super tall. Is it okay once it starts to get too tall to limit its height by pruning it?
Before you do that, you might look into semi-dwarfs. So semi-dwarfs are like a halfway in between. This may be a semi-dwarf. I was at Home Depot just getting a tree so I could have something for you to see. So I'd do that. Yeah, you can prune them back, kind of thing. All right, going across, so you?
Yeah. What causes a tree to have plenty of flowers, starts to shed buds, and then give on?
Okay, June drop. All right, I forgot to mention that, only for us. What happens is, when the trees bloom out, they throw out a zillion flowers. You know, you can smell them, kind of thing. And they do that because they don't know, how many bees are going to show up, how much pollination is going to happen. So they throw out a ton of flowers, right? Oh, hang on, I'll get there. So they're there, and then lo and behold, they all pollinate. And now you got a ton of fruit, right? So the tree self-pollinates, or self-prunes. It's called the June drop, only here it's more like the April drop. You walk out and you see all these little baby fruit all over the ground, little tiny ones. And that's the tree self-pruning. It's low, it says, oh my God, I can't ripen all this fruit, I don't have enough leaves. So I'm gonna drop a few of them. So to head that off is again, you probably need to fertilize it. And you've been raking your leaves? So, I'm teasing. Fertilizing it. Remember, I count on leaves for fertilizing it, but that's kind of unusual. Then I would, under those circumstances, I would fertilize it more.
Yeah.
You following? So that when the tree sets its fruit, it says, oh, I got lots of fruit, lots of nutrients in the soil. I'll be good. So more of them. So I would try that. I would fertilize.
I have a grapefruit tree. It's an old one, and it's putting out grapefruits.
Cute.
They're pink, and they're gigantic. And one of them is growing backwards. Another stem is down this way, and the butt sticks
Upside
out.
down.
Growing.
All right, that's unusual. Have
I'll
it.
send you a picture of it.
Oh, okay, that would work.
I'll send you one.
All right.
I moved into a house here in Cadigo City 3 years ago. 2 lemon trees in the backyard, no fruit on them. They were part of a hedge.
Are you out in the desert or are you in the
No,
cove?
right, Gerald Ford and Dayton.
You're out in the desert. You know, Dave Palmer, Gerald Ford, you're in the sand dunes, okay?
Okay, I guess.
Yeah,
Anyway, I'm near the Ritz-Carlton, not too far from there.
okay.
Anyway, no fruit. In the last 3 years, I've started to get fruit. I have 2 dogs too, which like to go pee under there, so that helps with the fertilizing. But the weirdest thing I'm getting is fruit rats that are eating the bark off the tree, off the branches.
They like
Upper
to,
layers.
they like to,
Not the fruit, but the bark.
yeah, I've had that
Off the
too.
branch.
They like it when, in the spring, when you got a lot of sap flow, they like to come in.
And how do you, even my
Into that.
pest control guy, he goes, I've never seen this before.
Uh,
We put boxes with a feeder for them to go in, but they're coming back little by little. It's how do you eradicate that?
Maybe a good cat.
It's coming from your neighbor's
Well, it's
house.
part of it on the wall too, so they can come off the wall to climb on the tree or come up the tree stalk. Now, the trunk is covered from sun, so it's protected. And I'm starting to get fruit now, and it gets plenty of water. It gets water in the morning and water at night. But it's the darndest thing. Part of the tree looks like I'm going to lose the tree because all these arms start to dry
Yeah.
out and everything dries, the leaves.
In the spring, during the flush, where there's a lot of sap movement up to the leaves from the roots, it's succulent. They like to eat it. Later on, when you get towards the summer, and you're not having to go if you have harder tissue,
Right.
they go find something else
And
to
it's
eat.
the newer branches, not the old.
Yeah, that's succulent type
Right.
stuff. Lady right behind you.
I have a tree that might be 50 years old and it's taller than the roof line. And it's a grapefruit tree, I believe you've read probably. And my question is, this past year, branches have died off and bark is peeling. And so, of course, everybody in the neighborhood is saying what's going on. And the gardener did not want to cut the dead branches off. He thought it would make the tree worse. So I'm asking, is the tree dying or does it have some disease and should I cut off the dead branches?
Is there any gum coming on the trunk? Do you see any sap?
Yes.
All right, that's Rio Grande gummosis.
Okay.
That's kind of a slow working, but ultimately you can't cure it, disease. So yeah, I would cut that part off and seal the like a wood preservative type thing, And the tree will go for quite a bit longer if you do that. All right, so coming back.
Spread between trees?
Yes?
Will that spread between trees?
Well, that's where you got to be careful with the pruning. Because unless you or your gardeners, when they prune the sappy tree and then move to an unsappy tree and they don't sterilize those pruners with alcohol or something, and they transfer the disease.
99% of the gardeners don't do it.
That's, I'm sure. They just do it. So.
What's the reasonable life expectancy of a citrus tree? Because I have some that are 50 at least, and they're starting to have the same symptoms this lady was talking about.
I think that the longer they live, they just become more, just like we do, more susceptible to stuff. I don't know, I'd have to do some Googling on what's the oldest citrus tree anybody's ever recorded. But, and then, you know, they just need more of everything when they get that big, etc.
What makes some citruses have very thick skin? Somebody gave me some grapefruit recently, and my goodness me, the skin was this thick on that grapefruit, and the meat was quite small. While others, the skin is very thin, and it's meat, more meat. What makes that? How do you change that?
I do not know the answer to that. I'd have to go online and check. Lady in pink.
I have a ruby red grapefruit tree that has gotten severely sunburned on the west side on just some branches, and some branches have died. Will that heal itself? I put some shade cloth on it, and I don't know. It's got over 200 fruit on it, so it didn't impact.
I would take the bark that's peeling, cracking.
Big crack, yes.
Right. You got to get rid of that.
Get rid of it like.
Just take a brush, just a really stiff brush, and knock that off, and then whitewash it.
Oh, with a whitewash?
Yeah.
On the limbs? She's talking about limbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can whitewash.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Way up. Oh, okay. We'll get that in a minute. Okay. And what was your question?
On my grapefruit trees or angelos, there are little branches which die down, little tiny ones. Do I need to cut those?
Are they above or below the bud union?
Oh, they're high.
No, you don't have to cut those off. Just let them go. Yeah, some of them will die off by themselves because it's shaded in there. But some of them will grow up high to try to get sunlight. Oh, I see what you mean.
Now they're almost ripe.
Yeah, they're almost right.
His fruit's upside down.
Turn the tape on.
Huh?
Just turn it around.
Now they're right. No, that's very interesting. It's what kind of fruit? I don't know if anybody can see this, but the stem's at the bottom of the tree. Okay, I'm going to steal your phone for a minute. So we're going to have to bail out of here because the place is going to start to lock up automatically. You're welcome. You're welcome.